Hello, welcome back to the Chirpin Chat where me and Ashley discuss all different types of topics. Today, we're going to be talking about housing. Now, you're wondering, what specifically about housing are we talking about? So, today we're going to be talking about the housing costs and how it correlates to AP Gov. Housing in America is surprisingly tied to history of civil rights, equal protection, and institutional discrimination. But how does it relate to civil rights specifically? The civil rights movement is linked to housing with the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which was a part of the Civil Rights Act. This act was passed to outlaw housing discrimination based on religion, sex, race, or national origin. The act itself had good intentions getting rid of redlining, which is the discriminatory practice where financial institutions or insurers deny or limit mortgages, loans, and insurance services, usually based on race or ethnicity. It still left a big wealthy gap, which greatly affected who could afford to buy in high-cost neighborhoods in this day and age. A big issue right now that's happening within the housing community is exclusionary zoning. Many wealthy people, mostly in white suburbs, use strict zoning laws to ban the construction of apartment buildings, townhomes, or multiple family housing. While these laws don't exactly mention anything about race, it's still pretty weird since they priced out low-income families from better high-opportunity neighborhoods with better schools. This can spark a debate whether or not this issue falls under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Mostly anything relating to civil rights now has been overruled or even taken away due to many bills being passed and other things like that. But another thing that also influences housing costs are political parties. When it comes to housing, a great majority of people have their opinions. And who's widely known for their perspectives? Political parties. Both the Democratic and Republican parties have their own views and opinions, so let's see how they view housing costs. The Urban Institute data has shown that one of the top issues for all voters across the political landscape is housing costs. Right now, housing costs are not doing too well, with them being widely high, like really, really high, especially from first-hand experience of literally rent costing more and everything like that, and hearing it from other people too. It's just gotten out of hand. Democrats mostly believe that the government should intervene to protect consumers and regulate the market, most viewing housing as a human right. They often advocate for an increase in federal funding for affordable housing, implementing rent control / stabilization measures, and taxing the bigger people like large corporations, landlords, and real estate speculators, which are people who purchase properties or landscapes in hopes of reselling for a quick profit. Most of their efforts are mostly focused on federal government power to promote economic equality and protect vulnerable people from the market exploitation. From the other perspective, the Republicans mostly view housing through free market capitalism, and overregulation from the government is what drives up costs for housing. They often advocate for deregulation, specifically cutting red tape like environmental views, strict zoning laws, and building codes that make it expensive and slow for the development of new homes. They believe that private developers will increase housing and naturally lower the prices. Their core ideology revolves around the free market principles, limiting government regulation, and deregulation. Of course, both of these parties have their own views on the situation, but the Urban Institute has also shown in their research that some solutions, such as permanent affordable housing, is enjoyed among registered Democratic and Republican voters. Now I'll head you over to Ashley.
Housing costs can be tied to federalism and Congress as well. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act was introduced and passed in the House on May 7th, and if it is passed through the Senate, it will be the most significant federal housing affordability package in decades. The bipartisan legislation goal is to reduce housing costs by incentivizing local governments. As of right now, it is in the Senate for final negotiations. Many news outlets describe this as the rare piece of legislation because it passed through the House with a 394-13 vote. This is the first major housing bill since the subprime mortgage crisis, which was during 2007 to 2010. And that crisis was revolving around the fact that banks were giving out too many risky loans, which then contributed to the 2008 stock market crash. Congress, during that time, passed two landmark pieces of legislation, one of them being the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008, and then the second one being the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Both of these had something to do with regulating banks because banks, like I said, were giving out too many risky loans that couldn't be paid back. Like, they were giving out to people who had, like, almost no credit, and, like, there was higher risk of them not being paid back, and then that resulted in a default. Anyway, Congress passed other landmark legislations revolving around housing. Some examples being the National Housing Act of 1934, which created the FHA / the Federal Housing Administration, and it also made mortgage more accessible. And then we have the GI Bill of 1944, which gave World War II veterans low-cost or zero down payment mortgages and also created a post-war housing boom. And then finally, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which banned housing based on race, origin, and religion, and it was later revised in 1988 to add sex and disability. Now on to federalism. Housing costs shows federalism due to the fact that housing is shaped by federal, state, and local governments. At the federal level, the government influences through national legislation, programs, and money. One example is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is an executive bureaucratic branch. And they provide numerous things such as housing vouchers and mortgage support like FHA loans, federal interest rates, and taxing policies, which also affect mortgage prices. At the state level, state governments can set rules on how housing / houses can be built, and they can do things like establish landlord-tenant laws and property tax rules. And at the local level, cities and counties have almost like direct control over housing supply. They decide on stuff like zoning, building codes, permits, and this affects housing costs because it determines how easy or how hard it is to build new homes and apartments.
This has been Ashley and Aiden on the Chirpin'
Chat. We hope you enjoyed our podcast.
See you next time.